So, Doctor Who has had a long and varied history. I mean, it's been a TV show for years, we all love it, it's got the books, it's got the toys, it's got a whole load of games, but once again, I feel that one area of Doctor Who that I rarely see anyone talk about is the comics released by Titan Comics, and I personally think that's a damn shame, because the comics are great, and they range from okay to an absolutely breathtaking time. So once again, I'm going to go through my Doctor Who comic collection released by Titan Comics and rank those that I think are the weakest to the best. We've got 15 different comics covering 14 different storylines, and I thought I'd just rank them for a bit of fun. Enjoy! Starting off the list at number 14, aka bottom of the list for me, is the 12th Doctor comics event, Supremacy of the Cybermen. Taking place shortly after the events of the Series 9 finale, Hell-Bent, this particular storyline sees Rassilon banished from Gallifrey but being discovered by the Cybermen. And together they end up changing history so that certain events in the Doctor's life now revolve around the Cybermen. For example, you see the 9th Doctor and Captain Jack and Rose Tyler return home to visit Jackie, only to find London swarming with Cybermen. The 10th Doctor and his companions Gabby Gonzalez and Cindy Wu meeting up with a Sontaran platoon looking to stop Cybermen on a shopping mall planet. The 11th Doctor, along with his companion Alice Oberfune, encountering Cyberlurians in the distant past. The 12th Doctor has to find a way to stop them. I'll admit I liked it a lot more after reading it the second time around, but I think the ultimate reason why it ends up at the bottom of the list is because it was billed as a multi-Doctor event, a Doctor Who comics event, multi-Doctors, and the thing is, yeah, it technically is, but the Doctors don't actually interact with each other. Like, they're not even aware of the other's existence in this case, and most of the focus does come down to the 12th Doctor, and him trying to reason with Rassilon to try and save the day and stop the Cybermen. And while it's fun, like a Doctor Who comic should be, I just feel like it would have been a lot funnier to see all of the Doctors come together to find a way to stop the Cybermen and Rassilon, but then again, that's just me. Up one space to number 13, we have the 10th Doctor comic, Facing Fate Part 1, Breakfast at Tyranny's. Now, this one, I'll admit, like Supremacy of the Cybermen, I liked it a lot more when I read it for a second time. First time I read it, I think I read it a bit too fast, and I just kind of got a bit mixed up with it, but essentially the 10th Doctor and his companions Gabby Gonzalez and Cindy Wu end up getting infected by a mind parasite in the form of a red TARDIS, and they have to try and find a way to escape from the parasite, but then when the parasite ends up kidnapping Cindy, the Doctor and Gabby have to travel back in time to ancient China to try and find Cindy and get her back home again. Once again, it's a decent story, and as I said, I did like it a lot more second time around. I think first time I read it a bit too fast. Second time I did like it more, but at the same time, this is one of the lower key stories. I mean, the Doctor Who comics can range, and some of them can be kind of low key, especially with single Doctors, but that's just me. Coming up at number 12, we have the first one from the 13th Doctor series, Hidden Human History. The Doctor is a little miffed when it turns out her companions actually might know more about history than she does, thanks to a mysterious new podcast, Triple H. While trying to figure out what's going on through history, the companions prove they do actually know quite a lot about the types of history that they're travelling to, thanks to Triple H. And they even end up running into two characters who they've encountered previously, Schultz and Perkins, who I'll get to in a bit. But Hidden Human History, I feel it's definitely the middle ground of this particular run of the comics. I mean, like with superhero movies or any big screen movies, the middle point is usually seen as the kind of weakest link. I mean, the first one you're usually full of excitement, the middle one you kind of and ah about, and the third one is usually go big. I mean, look at the Avengers movies. But yeah, I do feel that Hidden Human History is possibly the weak link in the chain, but it's still worth reading. And rounding out this particular tier on my Doctor Who comics list, we have the 12th Doctor comic, Ghost Stories. Now, The Return of Dr. Mysterio is actually one of my guilty pleasure episodes. I do love it. And I remember after rewatching it, I think about a year, maybe 2 ago, I'm thinking to myself, you know what, I'd love to be able to just read a comic about the adventures of the Ghost. And this one actually does the job fairly well. The 12th Doctor ends up reuniting with former companion Grant Gordon, as well as his girlfriend Lucy Fletcher and her daughter Jennifer, who I think is now around 11 years old, and he basically needs their help in order to deal with 3 different situations, which end up taking them across the universe. The first dealing with a super villain type bad guy known as the Smoke, another involving the Harmony Shoal taking over another planet, and the third dealing with the Sycorax. And just seeing the Doctor in a superhero comic, that to me is a big thumbs up. Anyway, that's that particular tier sorted. On to the next one. At number 10 on the list, we've got Time Lord Victorious, Defender of the Daleks. Now, I'll be honest, while I knew what the Time Lord Victorious was, I didn't entirely... I found it a little inaccessible, given that I haven't listened to a lot of the audio stories. However, the comic seemed approachable enough, so I thought I'd give it a go, and it comes in at number 10 on my list. Defender of the Daleks sees the 10th Doctor wake up in an alternate timeline where the Time War seemingly never happened, and the Daleks come to him requesting his help. It's revealed that there's another alien race that wants to destroy the Daleks, known as the Hond. And while the Daleks want to destroy everything in the universe that isn't Dalek, the Hond want to destroy everything in the universe and then kill themselves. I.e., they want no life to exist in the universe at all. And it's nice to see the Doctor teaming up with the Daleks. I mean, it's always going to be somewhat of a tough relationship or a tough thing to sell, but I think in this particular comic they do it very well. Even just a small crossover at the end with the 13th Doctor, she doesn't overtake the show, she's just in there for around about 5 minutes and then she pops off again, which I think it's nice to see. It's nice to see just a small thing just to carry the story home. Anyway, at number 9 we have the first 13th Doctor story, A New Beginning, to which the 13th Doctor and her friends Graham, Ryan and Yaz end up encountering 2 scientists named Scholes and Perkins, who have seemingly been trapped and recruited by an alien being known as the Hoarder. The Hoarder is seemingly trying to kidnap alien life forms so that he'll have one of at least every creature in the universe. Or at least that's what they've done. So it's up to the Doctor, her family, Scholes and Perkins to try and find a way out. And this, while I didn't read this until I had read something like 2 other 13th Doctor comics, I will admit this one is pretty good. It shows how the Doctor and her family, it portrays their relationship very well, and I think it's a nice one to see. Anyway, at number 8, we have the crossover comic Alternating Current. Now, this one follows another 10th Doctor, 13th Doctor crossover, which is higher up my list, so I will get to that one. But this one follows on from that, where the Doctor and her companions find themselves in a place where time has seemingly gone wrong. Sea Devils have taken over the Earth, Rose Tyler is a freedom fighter, and her parents are being held hostage. So the 10th Doctor and the 13th Doctor need to team up to find out what's wrong. And they end up travelling back in time to the events of one of their previous adventures, Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror. Now, I do feel it's a nice follow-on to Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, and this is actually one of the comics that made me want to see the Sea Devils again on screen, which we eventually got earlier this year with Legend of the Sea Devils, which was nice seeing again, but I do love what they've done with here in the comic. Like, they're not in it for very long, but at the same time, they do a good job with it. The Sea Devils do seem legitimately threatening. They keep to the classic design. And it's nice to see an alternate version of Rose Tyler who's not who's not indisposed to using weaponry when needed. I mean, even just when the 10th Doctor was trying to talk to him, she's like, "Where's my gun?" Which is nice to see. Anyway, coming up to number 7, we've got the third 13th Doctor comic, Old Friends. The Doctor and her companions once again going through adventures, and they find themselves running into the Doctor's old friend, the Time Lord known as the Corsair, or in this case, the Time Lady, who has a TARDIS shaped like a pirate ship, which is just awesome. To which it is nice to see at first that the Corsair doesn't recognise the Doctor because, of course, she's gone through regeneration. But then when she eventually works out who she is, I love the reaction that she has of just immediately running forward and hugging her old friend. But then, of course, more stuff happens and they end up essentially in a heist with the Corsair in trying to locate a star whale, previously introduced in the 11th Doctor story, The Beast Below. And I do love the relationship that the Doctor and the Corsair have in this particular story. Like, the Corsair is just completely out there, just wanting to have adventure, and the 13th Doctor is just like, okay, calm down, let's think about this logically. And I do think it's done very well. Anyway, rounding out this particular tier of the Doctor Who comics, at number 6, I would put the Christmas Doctor Who comic, Time Out of Mind. Now, when they eventually announced that there wasn't going to be a Doctor Who Christmas special in 2018, I think a lot of us were, slightly disappointed, but when they announced there would be a New Year special, we all cheered up. But if you want to see what a 13th Doctor Christmas story would be like, Time Out of Mind is your fix. I mean, you've got the Doctor and her companions encountering an Arctic base, an alien theme park, an Arctic base, elves, and Krampus. And if you know some of the previous Doctor Christmas specials we had, Time Out of Mind just slips right in there and does feel like what the equivalent would be if we had a 13th Doctor Christmas special. So if you're really kind of bummed that the 13th Doctor never had a Christmas special in the entirety of her run, I urge you, pick up Time Out of Mind, it'll give you your fix. Opening up the final tier, at number 5 we have the 2-part Doctor Who comic story, The Lost Dimension. This one, I'll admit it starts off a little slow, but once it gets going, it really gets going. You see, the 12th Doctor and his companions Bill Potts and Nardole, once again at Bristol University, encounter the Doctor's long-lost daughter, Jenny, who had previously been portrayed in Series 4 of Doctor Who by David Tennant's eventual wife, Georgia Moffat. However, it seems they haven't got that much time for a reunion, as some sort of virus is spreading throughout time, infecting various people and turning them into mindless zombies who only want peace. As a result of this, Doctors from multiple eras have to team up in order to work together in order to find out what's going on and put a stop to it. Now, while part 1 is mostly just the setup, but when part 2 gets going and you see the Doctors interacting with each other, this comic is just a whole ton of fun. I mean, just seeing the way that the 12th Doctor reacts to the 10th, then the 9th, and then when they ultimately manage to get hold of the 11th, it all works out great. The only thing I would really say against this particular run is that there were 1 or 2 points where I just felt that things didn't quite line up or didn't quite connect. Like, okay, most of the story does end up connecting. Like, in part 4 they show the 4th Doctor trying to call the 10th Doctor for help, and they do actually explain that in the 2nd volume. However, there are 1 or 2 pieces that, as I said, I wasn't quite sure they connected. For example, you see the 10th Doctor seeing a vision of the 3rd Doctor having problems, and while the 3rd Doctor, I guess, does come back into play later, he's not really a main focus, so I just kind of feel that was a bit pointless. And the other part is that you've got a random issue in there where River Song... while I do love River Song and Alex Kingston in the role, just having a single issue where she's off with an archaeology student, it just didn't quite seem to fit in with everything. It just was just kind of there. I mean, the only real connection was that we had Silurians in the story, and now they're encountering a Silurian civilization. It's just like, well, what's the point? I don't get that. But aside from that, I will say The Lost Dimension is a ton of fun to read, and you definitely should. Anyway, at number 4, we've got the 12th Doctor story, School of Death. Now, in this particular one, you get 3 separate stories. The eponymous one, School of Death, sees Clara taking a position as the new English teacher of a prestigious boarding school. However, when the Doctor comes to visit, he ends up discovering that the boarding school may be ground zero for a sea devil invasion. Now, like in Alternating Currents, this is one of the stories that made me want to see the sea devils again on screen, and I think on the page compared to on screen they're done incredibly well, and they were more kind of what I was hoping for when I heard the sea devils were coming back, because they did with the Sea Devils in the comic what I kind of wanted them to do, what they had done with the Silurians on screen, which is kind of give them an updated design but make it a bit more practical, show the actor's face, and therefore kind of build around that. To which I did love the design of the Sea Devils in this, because they did seem more monstrous. I mean, you could definitely see the kind of references to the classic design with the overall shape, but as I said, it was kind of great fun to read and did make me want to see the Sea Devils on screen. The other 2 storylines are okay. One features the Doctor and Clara dealing with some sort of alien parasite that causes people to get sucked into comic books, with them making 1 or 2 fourth wall jokes to the reader. And the last one sees the 12th Doctor once again encountering Osgood and a version of the K2 robot, sequel to the K1 robot from the classic 4th Doctor story, Robot. So yeah, I do think School of Death is a ton of fun, and you should read it if you get the chance. Up 1 spot to number 3, we've got the Doctor Who comic event, 4 Doctors. When Clara discovers information that may cause the end of the universe or problems with time, she attempts to warn former companions Gabby Gonzalez and Alice Oberfune that their doctors must never meet. That the event that causes time to effectively collapse is when their 3 doctors meet. However, the doctors have other plans, and this meeting is going to happen whether they like it or not. And it does bring a whole lot into it, including classic Who references with Marinus, and as the return of the Reapers, which I was glad to see. It does also feature some quite good twists. I do wish they could have incorporated the 9th Doctor more into it to actually make it a true 4th Doctor story. I mean, he does turn up at the end, but he was just shown not to really have had a part in it. So I will admit, the 4 Doctors is a great story, and if you can find a copy of it, definitely check it out. Anyway, my number 2 is one that I've been referencing several times throughout this list, and that is the 13th Doctor story, A Tale of Two Time Lords, A Little Help from My Friends. This one is the one that I'll admit I absolutely loved when I got it. It shows the 13th Doctor and her companions end up in the 1960s in London, and it turns out they've kind of gotten themselves into a period of time when the Doctor and Martha Jones were marooned on Earth in the 60s by the Weeping Angels, tying back into the new Doctor Who story Blink. And at the same time, they do actually manage to do it very well. I mean, one of my favourite panels in here is that the 10th Doctor has managed to find out that Graham, Ryan and Yaz are future companions of his. So they take him back to their TARDIS, and he's trying to figure things out. And then the 13th Doctor comes in, and he goes, "What, really?" And you think, oh god, he's going to say she's a woman, and this is all going to be wrong. But no, his first reaction to her is, wait, really? Still not ginger? Still not ginger. I love that. Just that small interaction between them, that to me gets a thumbs up, and I absolutely love it. The story shows them trying to deal with problems involving the Autons and the Weeping Angels, and it's just a ton of fun to read. And I urge you, just check it out. You won't be disappointed. But it's not quite my number 1, because of the Doctor Who Titan Comics runs that I've read so far, my favourite, and in my case the best one, still has to be Prisoners of Time from 2013. Because this, as I've said before, is a Doctor Who story I never thought we'd get on screen. I just never thought it would happen. And, okay, it can never really happen on screen, but they managed to do it in the pages. To which the Doctor's former companion brief companion, Adam Mitchell, has sought revenge on the Doctor and has teamed up with the Master and is travelling back along the Doctor's timeline, kidnapping one of each kidnapping the Doctor's companions in an attempt to make the Doctor choose only one who must survive. And it ultimately ends with a big, at that point, 11 Doctors all in one room together trying to take down the Master and Adam. And it's just a ton of fun to read, with each issue focusing on one Doctor and then one big story at the end where they all come together. Prisoners of Time is my number one Doctor Who Titan comic, and if you haven't read it, trust me, you're missing out. Trust me, you do want to read this. So there you go. There's my ranking of the 14 stories from Doctor Who Titan comics that I've read so far. I'd love to know your ranking if you want to give it down below. Anyway, till next time. See ya.